Hello class, Chris Bolschweiler here coming at you with a little presentation on CSS media queries. We'll just briefly talk about what they are. I'll show you the syntax and we'll just describe what they're used for. Let's just jump right in. A lot of what we'll discuss is some media queries in CSS3, but they briefly introduced in CSS2, so there's a lot of different varieties and stuff. So media queries, they let you adapt your site or app depending on the presence or value of various device characteristics and parameters. So we'll talk about the difference between a mobile view and a desktop view and a tablet view, and also portrait and landscape modes. CSS media queries are a key component of responsive design. For example, a media query can shrink the font size on small devices or increase the padding between paragraphs when the page is viewed in portrait mode, or bump up the size of buttons on any given touchscreen that supports media queries. In CSS, we use the @media syntax to define different style rules for different media types and or devices. Media queries are ways that you can adaptively build a website for different sizes depending on the device you're using. This is useful especially to help change things up, like a horizontal menu and switching to a vertical menu when you don't have enough room to view all of the content in any given view mode. CSS media queries allow you to target CSS rules based on, for instance, screen size, device orientation, and or display density. We use these media queries to tweak displays, but it's also not limited to like your mobile phone. We use media queries in printers, speech readers, TVs, braille devices. So it's more than just your average everyday screen, but it's also in a lot of other variety of electronic devices. So the syntax, we talked about the syntax, we use the @media rule. That's how every media query starts. So when we're writing out a media query, we always want to use the correct syntax, and that's the first thing that we're going to start with. Media queries can be used to check many things, such as width and height of a viewport, width and height of a device, orientation, landscape, portrait mode, tablet, phone, etc., and resolution. Media queries are a popular technique in today's technology for delivering a tailored style sheet for desktops, laptops, tablets, and mobile phones. And media queries, what they do is they just increase the responsiveness of our web page or the app that we're using. We can use media queries to specify certain styles, and these are not limited to documents or screen readers, but when we print, media queries are used for portrait mode, landscape, depending on how we want to print. A little fun fact, a lot of the browsers that we use today, the popular ones like Google Chrome and Firefox, they support the use of media queries, and Microsoft Edge and also Apple's Safari does as well. Let's briefly talk about media queries in HTML. In HTML, media queries can be applied to various elements. Inside the link elements media attribute, this is where they define the media to which a lined resource, typically CSS, should be applied. In the source elements media attribute, they define the media to which that source should be applied. And this is actually only valid inside of the picture element. And also in the style elements media attribute, this is where we define the media to which the style should be applied. So when we talk about CSS, we associate it with styling an HTML page in a browser. But as we're learning in this course, CSS is capable of handling more than just that. Since CSS2 was introduced, we could specify style sheets for specific media types, such as screen or print. Now, with media queries in CSS3, we are able to target specific screen sizes. We can have different blocks of CSS code for different screen and device sizes. We've already talked about how some of the biggest uses are to create responsive web pages based on the size of screens, basically to change the look of your site. This is something that is used in many different sites. Just about every site will have some sort of CSS media query involved. So some example code here. I apologize, this is a little bit small, but I have kind of a rough draft of a CSS style sheet here where we list the different types of devices and we list the screen sizes and the background associated with it, how it changes depending on the view. We have iPad, portrait, and landscape, and how the size changes depending on which view we are using. So we can imagine, as a web developer, if we had to build and maintain multiple versions of each page to cater to each screen. I'm not sure anybody would really want to do that, so to speak. But thankfully, CSS3 introduces media queries to us and makes life a little easier and exciting for us by not having to create multiple versions of the same web page to cater to whichever view we are trying to use. And then we also see that the syntax starts with the @media, and that's how they will always start. So to sum up, media queries, they just allow us to customize the presentation of our web page for a specific range of devices like mobile phones, tablets, desktops, without having to change any markups. A media query can consist, or does consist, of a media type and 0 or more expressions that match the type and conditions of a particular media feature, such as device width or screen resolution. If the browser that we're using, whichever one we decide, supports media queries, then we're good to go. A lot of them have some compatibility issues, and a lot of the developers are working on those, but most of the browsers, the popular browsers that we use today, have support for CSS3 media queries. And that about sums it up for CSS media queries. If you have any questions, just comment, and thank you for tuning in.